words. I had to laugh. Eviction? From my house? The house I had lived in before this neighborhood even had an HOA? Cynthia must have finally lost her mind. But that was fine. She wanted to play legal games? I knew the rules better than she did. That night, I sat back in my chair, watching security footage of the moment Bessie went up in flames. I zoomed in, frame by frame, until I caught what I was looking for: a flicker of movement, a shadow too close to the tractor right before the fire started. I rewound, sharpened the image, and there it was. Greg Whitmore. His smug face barely visible in the glow of the flames. I smiled. The next day, Oak Ridge Estates was thrown into chaos when Riley and his team of inspectors showed up unannounced. Fire trucks lined the street as uniformed officials started taking notes, measuring hydrant distances, and marking hazards with bright red stickers. Homeowners peered out their windows, confused, watching as their perfect little paradise was dissected like a crime scene. Cynthia stormed outside, demanding answers, but Riley just flashed his badge and informed her that a formal investigation was underway. That's the thing about fire code violations. There's no debate. No appeals process. When something's a hazard, it gets fixed, or the city shuts you down. Greg, realizing what was happening, tried to slink away, but I caught him before he could make it to his car. "You know," I said, casually leaning against the driver's side door, "arson's a pretty serious crime." His face twitched. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone, playing the security footage. The color drained from his face as he watched himself in the grainy night vision, standing too close to my tractor, the flicker of a lighter in his hand just before the fire erupted. I smiled. "I do." Greg stammered something about misunderstanding, about it being an accident, about how he was just there to make sure my property was properly cleared. I let him babble, watching him dig himself deeper into the hole. Then I gave him a choice. Either he confessed, or I turned the footage over to the fire department and let them handle it. He chose the former, of course, blubbering out some nonsense about following orders. An hour later, Cynthia called an emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't invited, of course, but that didn't stop me from showing up. I walked in just as the board was arguing about how to handle the violations. Some of the more reasonable members were panicking, realizing that their cozy positions in the neighborhood hierarchy were now at risk. Cynthia, red-faced and fuming, was trying to downplay everything, insisting they could fight this. I cleared my throat. The room fell silent. "Looks like you've got a real mess on your hands," I said, slipping my hands in my pockets. "Violations, fines, potential criminal charges. Not to mention the little arson problem you've got running around." Cynthia straightened, fixing her expression into one of forced calm. "Mr. Calloway, this is a private meeting." I grinned. "Yeah, and that's a private hydrant out there with a tree planted directly in front of it. We all got problems." One of the newer board members, someone with at least half a functioning brain, nervously cleared his throat. "What do you want?" I leaned forward. "I want you to resign. All of you. Dismantle the HOA before it collapses on its own." Cynthia scoffed. "That will never happen." I nodded. "All right. Then I'll just let this fire inspection report go public. Let the city start handing out citations. Let the state fire marshal's office start digging into whether or not you've been falsifying safety record. And oh," I pulled out my phone again, pressing play on the video of Greg, "I'll just leave this little gem with the authorities." Silence. Cynthia's jaw tightened. The others shifted, their carefully built kingdom crumbling around them. I saw it in their faces. The realization that they weren't running the neighborhood anymore. That they had never really had control at all. Cynthia's voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. "You'll regret this." I shrugged. "You burned my tractor." She stood there, seething, as I walked out the door. I didn't need to stay for the vote. I already knew how it would go. The morning after the emergency HOA meeting, Oak Ridge Estates felt different. The usual self-important air of the neighborhood, the one that always carried the distant sound of lawnmowers, barking dogs, and nosy neighbors peering through their curtains, was now filled with something else. Uncertainty. The HOA had ruled this place like a dictatorship for years, and now, their foundation was crumbling beneath them. The fire department's inspection had spread like wildfire. Every homeowner had either received a citation, a warning, or an official order to fix something on their property. The same people who used to gloat about how the HOA kept things in order were now panicked, realizing the organization they so proudly served had screwed them over in the worst way possible. The fines alone were enough to make some of them break down on their front lawns. I watched it all with my morning coffee, taking in the slow unraveling of a regime that had gotten far too comfortable. By noon, the real damage was showing. Word had gotten out about Greg's little arson stunt, and while the HOA board was desperately trying to keep it under wraps, the neighborhood had turned into a chattering storm of speculation and anger. No one wanted to be associated with arsonists, and certainly not a board that let it happen in the first place. I knew it was only a matter of time before the cracks split wide open. It came faster than expected. A news crew showed up. Some local reporter with perfectly styled hair and a fake smile stood outside the HOA office, microphone in hand, delivering a story that I knew would bury Cynthia and her cronies. Residents of Oak Ridge Estates are in shock after a former fire marshal exposed major safety violations and alleged acts of arson within the homeowners association. The camera panned to a group of neighbors, some confused, some angry, muttering among themselves. A few of them looked ready to riot. One woman, clutching a fire hazard citation, practically growled into the microphone, "We paid these people to keep things safe, and now we're all stuck with fines and a bunch of illegal fire traps? What the hell were they even doing all these years?" The news crew tried to get a statement from Cynthia, but she refused to come outside, barricading herself in the office like some kind of besieged war general. I could have left it alone right there, let the situation spiral on its own, but there was still one last card to play. I spent the afternoon going over my footage again, making sure everything was airtight. The security camera's timestamp was clear as day. Greg, the flames, the smug look on his face before he realized how much trouble he was in. I compiled everything, videos, citations, reports, and forwarded it straight to the fire department, the local police, and, just for good measure, the city council. By the time I finished, I sat back, exhaling slow. It was done. That night, the HOA office was set ablaze. I woke up to flashing lights and the sound of sirens echoing through the neighborhood. Fire trucks lined the street as flames consumed the very building that had housed all of Cynthia's rules, fines, and delusions of power. A crowd had gathered, watching in a mix of horror and fascination. Some people whispered among themselves, half convinced it was some sort of divine justice. Others openly speculated about who did it. But I already knew. Greg. It was too perfect. The man had already torched one thing in his blind loyalty to Cynthia. Why not go all in? Maybe he thought he could destroy the records. Maybe he wanted to send a message. Or maybe he had just finally cracked under the weight of it all. But none of it mattered anymore, because the second the flames were put out, the police were already waiting. Greg tried to make a run for it, but he wasn't exactly the athletic type. They tackled him to the pavement before he even made it halfway down the street. And Cynthia? She wasn't much better off. The next morning, the police arrived at her doorstep with an arrest warrant. Conspiracy, fraud, negligence. Her laundry list of violations had finally caught up with her. As she was led out in cuffs, the neighborhood stood outside, watching in dead silence. No one cheered. No one shouted. They just stared as the woman who had made their lives miserable was stuffed into the back of a squad car, seething with rage but powerless to do a damn thing about it. As she was driven away, our eyes met through the car window. She didn't say a word, but her expression screamed it all. This isn't over. But it was. The next few weeks passed like a fever dream. The city officially disbanded the HOA, citing gross misconduct and legal failures. The board members who hadn't been arrested resigned in disgrace, their reputations shattered beyond repair. The neighborhood itself felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted. People who had never spoken to each other were suddenly chatting, sharing stories about their run-ins with the HOA, laughing over old grudges. Some folks even started repainting their houses whatever damn color they wanted, like some sort of suburban rebellion. I just sat back and watched it unfold, content with the chaos I had helped create. One afternoon, as I worked on my new tractor, Bessie 2.0, a beauty of a machine with more horsepower than I probably needed, Captain Riley showed up. He leaned against the fence, arms crossed, shaking his head. "You know," he said, "in all my years, I've never seen a fire marshal single-handedly take down an entire HOA." I grinned, wiping my hands on a rag. "Guess there's a first time for everything." He chuckled. "We got the final reports back. Turns out the HOA had been fudging safety inspections for years. The city's not just shutting them down, they're considering a full-scale redevelopment of the whole neighborhood." I raised an eyebrow. "So what you're saying is, I helped make the place safer?" "Something like that." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Listen, Hank. You ever think about getting back into it? We could use a guy like you. Maybe not full-time, but as an advisor." I glanced at my tractor, at the quiet street, at the people finally free from the nonsense that had controlled their lives for so long. I smirked. "Well," I said, "seeing as I just saved an entire neighborhood, why not?" And just like that, Oak Ridge Estates became something new. Free.